It's time once again for Evolve Sales Live. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jonathan Fisher. Talk to almost any business development leader, marketing director, or sales manager, and the topic of lead generation comes up pretty quickly. Most would agree that successful lead generation is absolutely a core competency requirement in any business. Entire divisions of salespeople and untold millions, if not billions of dollars are dedicated to the task. Well, today's guest believes that lead generation, as it's currently understood, is based on an outmoded and underperforming model. In fact, he says there's a far better strategy which is built for the way customers buy today, which he calls demand generation. Here today to help us discover this new model is Todd Clouser. Todd brings a content creator's background to the conversation today with over a decade of experience in video production, digital and social media marketing, business development, and brand management. Today, he works as the lead brand marketing manager at Refine Labs, a marketing research and development firm which helps companies innovate their revenue engine the way they innovate their products. Todd, it's great to have you on the show today. Welcome to you.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
So just to start off where I always do, Todd, maybe share what does the everyday workaday life look like for the lead brand manager there at Refine Labs?
Yeah, so I'm in charge pretty much of the content production and distribution of pretty much most of the Refine Labs content. So me as well as my team, we do a couple podcasts. We have one that a lot of people know of with Chris Walker. We have another podcast that the rest of our team kind of contributes to. And then we also have a Talent Destination podcast. So we run all of those as well as all the content that gets created and distributed through that on LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, channels like that.
Sounds like that keeps you pretty busy.
Yeah.
So you have a pretty interesting story as to how you got into this kind of work. Anyone looks at your LinkedIn profile, they'll be struck by the fact you call yourself the world's worst SDR. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
World's worst marketer.
Well, you do say that, but you also mentioned about SDR, your brief stint. So if you would share with us about that.
Yeah, so I actually started my career as an SDR. And basically that kind of led me to where I'm at today as a content marketer. And the reason for that was, and I'll be the first to admit I was a terrible SDR. But I would, I'm dialing 80 to 100 times a day, having these conversations with people that did not want to talk to me. They did not request me to call them or a demo or anything like that. So I didn't get very far. And this was a very early stage startup. So there was no product market fit or anything like that. It was just it was a difficult task. And luckily I was the first person on the team. So, I went and talked to the CEO and said hey, I want to change what I'm doing, because it was either I'm going to quit and go find something else just because I just couldn't do it, or I was going to pitch this new idea and see how it went. And that new idea was, let's create a YouTube channel and create this super educational content for our audience, with the intent of that kind of bringing them to the website and learning about the product and all that. And what happened is we created this channel, we had some success, and we learned very quickly that the education and what we were providing from the content was actually way more beneficial to our audience than even the original business plan. So we actually shifted the entire business plan to focus more on that educational path. And I did that for a long time. We grew that YouTube channel to about 700,000 subscribers, about 9 million views a month. And yeah, that's just kind of where I learned how to take long form content, break it down into all these other shorter forms, and actually drive demand for a product that way.
Well, and that's what we're here to talk about today, Todd, is your thesis and those of your cohorts there at Refine Labs, that far better than lead generation is demand generation. I'm going to ask you to define that in just a moment, but first, a friendly reminder to everybody on the program today. This is a live show. and we'd like you to participate live. So make sure you begin sending in your questions. When we get to the end of the core of our conversation, we will have an Ask Me Anything Q&A session with our guest expert, Todd Clouser. So Todd, go ahead and define terms, if you would, for us to start off with. What in the world is demand generation, and how does that differ from conventional lead generation?
So the way that I would define it, and there may be little nuances in this that different people describe it as, but like the way I define demand generation is I am creating content that I'm putting out in the channels where my audience likes to hang out. So like whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, like it's going to differ based on, your audience and your target, where they hang out, putting out content on those channels, engaging with them and creating brand affinity. So they may not be in a buying motion right now, but that's okay because, capturing that demand right now from all of these people isn't my goal. My goal is to build that brand affinity. So 3, 6, 9 months down the road, when they decide they need my tool or product or whatever, I'm the first person they think of. I'm the first company they think of. And now they're doing, branded search looking for me rather than going to a G2 and searching, best XYZ tool. So that's creating demand. You're building affinity for, your category, your company, your product. Lead generation.
Yeah, go ahead. That's the thing I was going to ask you. Go ahead. Lead generation as opposed to that.
Yeah. So lead generation, on the other hand, is with demand generation, it's a very audience, customer centric way of distributing content. These people are already on LinkedIn. They're looking at their feed, already on TikTok, looking at their feed. You're giving them content for free where they hang out. With lead generation, and your goal is to educate them, right? Your goal is to entertain them, whatever that may be, whatever your strategy for creating that demand is. With lead generation, I have a totally different goal. My goal is to take a piece of content, which is generally like an ebook or a gated video or some other piece of content that I trade to you in order to get your contact information so we can do cold outreach to. And the difference is you have a short-term mindset of like, I want to get all these leads and, try to close them right away, versus I want to build this relationship, this demand, this thought leadership, whatever you want to call it. So when these people are ready, they come to me and they don't go to my competitor.
Mm-hmm. So the thing is, lead generation is kind of the norm. I mean, it's almost a universal conversation. You rarely hear of anything other than that when it comes to business development. And it's clearly an entrenched model. Let's unpack a little more deeply then. What are the issues with it? So it's really clear to our audience why this alternative of demand generation could be so important. So what are tech leaders like getting wrong here? Like in focusing on it, what are the key errors or problems that arise?
The key errors or problems that arise with lead gen is it's not customer focused, right? Like we all talk about wanting to be customer focused, provide the best customer experience, like all of these things. But then we get into the real world and it's like we need to close this stuff now. These people don't want to talk to us. It's a good way to burn bridges. I think there's a better way to do, I don't even want to call it lead gen. Like there's a better way to do outbound when demand gen comes into play. So basically, like when you have a marketing team doing lead gen, the goal is to get the sales team as many possible leads as they can so they can run the outbound engine, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the problem with that is the same way AEs have their revenue targets, SDRs have their, demo sat targets, marketers have their MQL targets. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, MQLs are that's an extremely easy metric to game. So like when you have it's not uncommon. You'll have a marketing team crushing their MQL targets, and you'll have a sales team that is like not even close to hitting their quota for the month or quarter or whatever. And like, there's clearly misalignment there. So, you start getting salespeople that are getting fired because they're not hitting their revenue numbers. But in reality, the problem isn't that the salesperson can't close. It's that they're being given terrible leads from the marketing team. So basically the how you can start to turn this ship around is you get a tool like a Zoom Info or whatever to let your sales team use to go outbound with. And then on the marketing side, that frees the marketing team up to do what they're best at, which is not being a sales enablement lead gen, tool. There's millions of tools out there that can do that for your sales team. Now they become a demand generation team, and their sole purpose is to drive inbound demo requests. Because like we all know, if someone comes inbound requesting a demo, that's going to close at a much higher rate than if I'm, cold outbounding everybody. And the beauty of that is when marketing can focus on demand gen, you start getting a lot more of these hand raisers coming through, and your outbound team doesn't have to call 100 people a day because they have these way more interested buyers coming inbound. Now they can focus on prospecting really well. And this is where it gets into like an SDR can become, you can almost run a demand gen motion. I don't know if you want to call it that, but like your SDRs can get super creative in how they prospect, because instead of having to dial 100 times a day, now I can spend a lot more time and I can do way more creative things to get somebody's attention that, instead of going directly to my trash or spam or whatever, now it's like, hey, I got to share this with like my SDRs, my marketing team, like internally, like check out this, rap that somebody sent me, or check out this, salespeople have lots of ways to be creative in their outreach. And like this model gives them way more time to do those things that we know are more effective.
It sounds like a fantastic alternative, the way that you trace that out, Todd. I'm wondering why there is such a disconnect, though. I mean, MQL stands for like marketing qualified lead, right? So you would theoretically think that means this is somebody who's interested by definition. So theoretically, where's the disconnect, right? What happened there?
Well, the disconnect is, I mean, this happens at all levels of the organization, right? I mean, in marketing, we have an MQL target. So you start getting towards the end of the month, and for the sake of round numbers, you need to create 100 MQLs, and you're only at 60. Now, I'm going to start putting budget or doing things to just generate as many leads coming in as I possibly can, because I'm not measured on if they close or not on the marketing team. I'm just measured on how many I can get to give to my SDR. It's the same thing at the SDR level. The SDR isn't their gold based on demos sat, or in some cases, demos booked. So like they're not necessarily, incentivized to get a demo that's going to close for their AE.
Yeah.
They're just getting a demo that they think is going to sit in the chair, whether they care if they close or not.
Yeah.
So like, and at the end of the day, the AE and the business are the ones that pay for it, because everybody else down the line is just gaming the system.
Yeah. And it's not these are bad people trying to be sneaky. It's just that they're improperly incentivized is what I'm hearing.
Well, they're improperly incentivized, and they've got families to feed and bills to pay and all that. So, like,
Right.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
Well, it's funny how when you set, so these are supposedly KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. Theoretically, you hit some target numbers, then that should lead mathematically, just based on broad probability factors, right, into outcomes you're looking for. Problem is, if that's not done correctly, you can be measuring, and it's exactly the wrong outcome. Boeing has been going through an amazing shift away from their sterling reputation they've had since the 1930s, largely because they moved away from measuring their team members on how few corrections or issues they would have in their designs to how quickly could they get their design ready for the assembly lines.
Yep.
And that one cultural shift, and can you guess it's because a lot of venture money came in? No offense to our venture listeners, but sometimes it goes right up the chain, doesn't it? So I love your focus here on, okay, what's the outcomes we really want? We don't want butts in chairs. We want buyers in chairs, right?
Yep.
We don't want just, okay, they were marketed and said they'd come. We want somebody that actually could be a potential revenue generator for the business. And just think about how demoralizing it is, this old model on so many AEs out there. And the same thing that you're talking about, gaming the system with just generating a lead. Okay, it meets the criteria. It's MQL target hit.
Yep.
Same thing happens with dials, right? Burning through dials. Most of us in our career at some point have been there. Oh, I got to burn through and get to my last whatever it is, dials, right? And you don't care. You don't care if you got 15 receptionists. You're not really pushing through to get to the decision maker because that's not how you're being measured. So it's an important message. I love that. Well, let's go deeper then with this alternative. I think you sold me that I like this as a better alternative. I think you sold the audience. Tell us more. How can we begin to put this into practice in our companies, a demand gen model?
So there's a ton of different ways tactically that you can put this into practice. I think for most people, the question or the difficulty is not necessarily putting it into practice, but actually selling it up to leadership to actually, let marketing do this, because the initial what's going to happen in the immediate, right when you start, is leads are going to go down, right? Because in the past, we're cranking out ebooks, getting people's emails, doing events to get people's emails. And then all of a sudden, like, our strategy shifts to create content that, creates interest organically. So, like, we don't have that, 1,000, leads that we used to be able to just hand over to sales. Like that doesn't, those go down. So initially you kind of have to, like, before you even start thinking about this, you have to manage the expectations. Like, okay, yes, leads are going to go down in the short term, but we're going to see revenue and sales velocity and demos booked and all these things that we actually care about are going to go up. And typically, like, at Refine Labs, we tell people, like, typically it's like 2 times your sales cycle to really start seeing results from this. So I think the first thing is managing those expectations. But then as you are pitching this, the other thing is, like, we tell people you need to run a split the funnel analysis. So essentially what that is you take all your different pipeline sources and you measure them the whole way through the funnel and seeing what is closing at the highest rates. And when you do that, you're going to see, hand raisers coming in requesting a demo are going to close at a way higher rate than any other pipeline source you have out there, lead gen, cold outbound, whatever it is that you're doing. So, like, when you break it out like that, you can take that to leadership and say, like, okay, look, these leads over here may go down, but, like, look what's actually generating the revenue for us. And this is what we're going to increase. So, I mean, that's kind of like a very basic way to look at it.
So an internal marketing piece is required to sell people on this.
Yeah, for sure. Because, like, the demand gen side of it is going to be, that's the marketing side of the house, right? I mean, salespeople can do this too. Like, I always tell people your favorite salespeople are only your favorite salespeople because they're really good at marketing. If you go out on LinkedIn, like the people that you get the advice from, that you actually put into your workflows and whatever you're doing day to day, like those people are taking this demand gen mindset to their personal to a personal level rather than a company level. So it's the same thing. Like you're basically modeling that behavior, and you can do it with organic, you can do it with paid. Like there's all these different ways to do it, but that's kind of how you have to get started. Like it's a marketing function. And then once you start doing that, again, the goal is demo requests. And when marketing's goal is demo requests and not leads generated, like it also frees up, like I said before, it frees up your salespeople to do things that help them be successful in their own outreach.
Makes a lot of sense. And then from there, so what's your next step? So you get buy-in, maybe you get a couple of champions sold on the concept. Like when you're talking about creating content, you just even calling it demand gen says something to my marketing mind. One of my mentors from years ago was Chet Holmes. He used to talk about education-based marketing. Mm-hmm. The idea here is that there is probably rarely more than, say, 9% of your addressable market that's actively buying right now. They're already looking.
And I would say that's high.
Yeah, it may be high today, right? It's gotten more crowded. So the use of the word demand, to me, speaks directly to the kind of content you're talking about. Like, it's not just a bunch of cute stuff. You could do some cute stuff, right? Have a little fun, use humor, what have you, do some quirky things. A lot of it has to do with what voice your brand has. But in terms of the content itself, what does the concept of demand gen require in terms of our content mapping?
First off, I want to, when you say content mapping, like, are you talking about like the style of content that you're putting out?
Like the whole plan of what types of content are going to be most effective in your model?
So I think this is another kind of fundamental shift that you have to think about. Like typically the way people think about marketing is like, you've got like top of funnel, awareness stuff, middle of the funnel. Like as you get lower, you're getting more and more salesy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a very lead gen mindset. With demand gen, like your entire funnel, we basically call it's more like a pipe. It's not a funnel. Like you are educating at like every point. Like there's no point where it's like, okay, like we've got them down to this point in the funnel. Like we're going to shift our content, strategy over to talking about product features and how it's going to, like, it's always educational. And again, like you got to think from a viewer or someone in the audience, or, someone who may not even know that they have the problem you're solving. Like, you got to think, what is the type of content that I'm going to watch? Because like there's a whole nother side to this, which is like the demand capture side, which is, that's kind of like you've created all this demand. Now they're looking for your specific, product. Like that's different. But like when you're in the motion of creating that demand, awareness, affinity, like it's all about creating value. Mm-hmm. So like I'm not thinking about this as like whether they're top of funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. I'm just thinking about like, okay, if I have what are the questions that my audience would be asking? Mm-hmm. And like this is kind of like where I get into like talking about how to create content, how to put it out there so it's very audience centric. And that's where you finding what that messaging is. That's kind of where you get into like the tactical stuff of like, how do you actually execute this? And if that's what you mean by like content mapping.
No, the first part. So the content itself, it needs to drive some demand, right? Because most of your market by percentage doesn't necessarily know they need what you have, or at least they don't know why they should have your solution over another. And there's not a compelling reason for them to switch until you educate them on that. So there's probably got to be a lot of research that is done. You can't just put together your classic features and benefits and here's a company history and try to have a little fun and think you're going to get a lot of people signing up for demos, would be my assumption. Am I on track or am I missing something?
No, 100%. Like, again, it comes back to answering this is what I tell people in generic content strategy. It's like 99% of marketers will just like, they look internally, they're like, okay, what does our product do? Let's create content around like how we think that could help this market. Mm-hmm. Whereas like nobody's actually talking to a customer, whether that's like me talking to you in like interview style or me going out on LinkedIn or wherever my customers hang out and seeing like posts or questions or things that are coming up in comments. Most companies aren't doing that. They're just like throwing content out there to see what sticks and trying to like relate it back to their product. But 9 times out of 10, like that's not what people are looking for. So like one of the things I tell people is like, when you're trying to figure out what your audience wants, there's 3 super easy ways to do it that nobody does. One is you can literally do customer interview research. Like,
what a thought.
What a thought, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the second is you can go out and you can ask people in like in a wider arena. So like number 1 is like, all right, I'm going to call my customers and talk to them. Number 2 is, okay, I'm going to post some content out on LinkedIn asking people questions rather than trying to like tell them what I think they want to hear. Mm-hmm. And the other one is like literally going into other people in your industry's comment section and seeing what questions are coming up. Like you don't even, there's literally like very little work involved in doing that. But like, these are 3 ways that you can very easily figure out the questions and the problems that people are having. So.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I love it. Well, how will people know they're doing it wrong? If they're going to really take and run this whole demand gen model, give us 30 seconds of how to avoid a pitfall when trying.
So you need to figure out like positive signals. So like in the beginning, when you're creating content, your positive signals are going to be like, are the right people engaging with my content? What are the conversations that are happening that are coming up from my content? Am I getting, guest appearances on podcasts? Like I'm becoming like, I hate using the word thought leader, but like a thought leader in my space. Like those are the initial signals that you're going to see. And then after that, once you have this going for, 30, 60, 90 days, like, are you actually seeing people coming through and requesting demos and then telling you that they heard about you through these demand gen actions that you're doing? So like, in order to measure this, we talk about this all the time at Refine Labs, but like simply putting a, where did you hear about us, open field text form on your demo request form, people will write a book on where they found you. I saw I heard your CEO on a podcast, and then I went and asked somebody in, whatever community, and X, Y, and Z told me that like you were good to work with. It's not uncommon to see that level of depth when you do that and you start doing these demand gen activities. So like that's
it's a good sign.
The second thing, like it's gonna tell you people are coming in, and then finally it's like, are these people closing?
Yeah. So you should see. So ratios should be boosted from this approach if you're doing it the right way. Is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Nice. Well, audience, it's been a great conversation. We're going to move over to Q&A here in just a moment. But if you'd like to take things further, you can absolutely follow the whole team over at Refine Labs by simply going to their website at refinelabs.com. You can also find Todd Clouser on LinkedIn. Connect to him directly. There's the spelling of his name. Fellow Kraut like me, it's Clouser. And see what he's got going on. He tells me there's a whole team of them posting really great content on LinkedIn and elsewhere all the time. Also, a friendly reminder that today's show, as always, is sponsored by Overpass. Need to build a team of remote sales pros fast? There are thousands of highly qualified potential hires waiting for you on the Overpass talent marketplace. The leading solution for hiring pre-vetted talent, Overpass makes building a high-quality team quick and easy. Filter by industry and experience. Interview, hire, and begin onboarding in as little as 2 days. Create your free account today at overpass.com. All right, so let's get over to some Q&A. We got some good questions coming in. One from Andrew. He's asking, do you recommend using video in the sales process? As you're a creator yourself, do you think that's a good move? Is it a little cheesy, or what do you think about that?
I'll say this. I haven't been an SDR in a long time, so I don't want to go out on a limb and tell you like what you should and shouldn't do like in a very specific sales role. I will tell you this. When people get this is from a consumer standpoint of a lot of sales outreach. When people get creative with their outreach, whether that's video and look, video can be just as bad as any other form of communication. If it's like, if you write me a non-personalized, like cheesy email, and instead of sending me that, you just send me the exact same scripted thing in a video, like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. But if you get super creative in like the delivery of your message, absolutely. Like, but it doesn't have to be video. Like it could be video. It could be like, I've responded to people that have sent poems. Like there's all different creative ways that you can like get somebody's attention rather than, just the typical sales email. So
nice. Well, here's a related question. I'll hit Andrew's too real quick here. He also asked, do you recommend the phone as a first touch point? Is that something that still has legs? Do you recommend against it, for it? Don't know. If you don't know more, tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, again, like I'm speaking about this from a consumer level, not as like someone who's actually dialing. Mm-hmm. So take this with a grain of salt. But again, to me, it's more difficult to be creative on a phone because people, I mean, like I don't want to throw out statistics that I don't know to be 100% true, but like a lot of sales calls are scripted. So like you have to stick to at least within the guardrails of a specific script, or like you'll get dinged by your manager. So to me, and plus like, especially if you're calling my cell phone, like most of the times, like it's going to be like marked as spam and I'm not going to answer it anyway.
Yeah.
So something that you can create, like this is kind of taking like the creator economy mindset, like creator mindset into a sales process. Like if you can pre-record, pre-make, do whatever, something, and then send it to me, like at least for me, I'm going to be more likely to share or react to it.
That makes a lot of sense. A great question came from Michael Novak. He's actually asking, whose feedback is more important, buyers or those who didn't buy?
This is pretty interesting. We actually just did a I wasn't involved in it, but my team just did a podcast on win-loss analysis and all the things that you can gather from like a win-loss analysis. And the whole premise of not the whole premise, but a huge part of that conversation was like, everybody looks at like why we won.
Mm-hmm.
And very few people look at like why we lost. And there's so much insights that can be gathered from, why we lost certain deals that, I mean, I don't want to say one is more important than the other, but like you should be looking at both.
Yeah. Yeah. No one likes to look at it. It sounds like a negative, right? But
yeah,
there's plenty of lessons there, right? I mean, that's the other side of the coin. You don't want to know only what you did well. Where can you still improve? So, Ivan is asking a question. It's a little long in the wording here, so I'm going to see if I can just get to the gist of it. Based on the way the algorithms work, it's a social media marketing tactical question. Mm-hmm. And based on the way the algorithms seem to favor more your free posted content as opposed to paid ads, what do you recommend? Should you do a mix, or just really put all your eggs kind of in the your creative posting strategy? What do you recommend there?
So, two things here. One is I would steer clear of posting like my product is XYZ. Like, here's why it's important to you. By saying like, if I don't post about my product, how will people know that I work for XYZ company? If you're doing this properly, that's not going to be the case, because like most of the time your messaging will be aligned. So like for me, I work for a, we help marketing teams run their demand gen strategies. So I talk a lot about demand gen. I talk about how to create content, how to, generate interest through content. I'm never talking about like Refine Labs can do XYZ. But because the messaging of my company and my information is aligned, when people like associate me with a type of content, it's aligned with how I want them to associate with my company. Now, that being said, that's not going to be everybody, right?
Right.
So if I'm a salesperson and I'm selling HR software, I'm not necessarily a thought leader, subject matter expert in the human resources space. However, there's two things you can do here. I mean, one is like you're a salesperson. You can just talk about sales. You can talk about your daily, stuff that's happening to you every day. And by becoming an expert in that space and just becoming well known on LinkedIn, Reddit, TikTok, wherever your audience is, like people find you. And like this may be like a tangent here, but like, for instance, Chris Walker, who's the CEO at Refine Labs, he is very like, everything is very educational. Like you watch one of his videos, like you feel like you should have paid for that because like it's that good. That allows me, because we have that high level subject matter expert, doing this content every day, that allows me to kind of like come down a level and like I can put out, marketing skits that still have the underlying message. Like I used to do this. Like he would talk about something on the podcast, and then that would give me content ideas for the week. Like he's talking at a very high level about, pick a topic. I take that same topic, and instead of going into like detail, like that he can go in way more detail than I can take that topic and I can insert it into, one of my series used to be like inserting myself into a movie scene. So like half the conversation was me, and I would make that movie scene about demand gen or whatever the topic was. And like, again, like if I was the only person you saw doing that, like, yeah, it's funny. Am I gonna spend, $30,000 a month because I saw a funny video? Like maybe not, but like I'm getting in front of a lot of people with this comedy. People are seeing him and they're sharing with their CMO. Like we're hitting people at all levels of their career and like their interest levels.
Sure. Maybe even inside, even organizationally, right? Usually there's a generational spread inside the organizations that are your prospects. So I wonder if that gives you a little more oomph in your group efforts there as well. I'm going to bring in one of my new questions that I just thought of, which is kind of related to what I just said. Are there concerns, or should you take a look at kind of things like tone when it comes to who your target audience is? Like some of these larger accounts, I think you kind of partially answered it already. You're getting away with it because you have multiple personalities and styles on the team. Yep. Maybe speak that a little bit more if you would. Like if you're smart, you've got your vertical or verticals lined up. You know your profile, who you're trying to target. Does that influence it to a certain extent, or what are your thoughts on that? Like the way you execute, is that an impact?
Yeah, I think so. So like for going back to the example I just used, like let's say I'm a VP of marketing at my company, and I don't have a high level subject matter expert already, like a Chris Walker that's putting out all this educational content.
Right.
Is my initial strategy going to go out and make all these like funny marketing skits? Probably not. Unless my, it's a product that doesn't have to be explained in a deep level. Maybe if it's an easy sell that, that could be the case in some like PLG motions or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that wouldn't be my first play. Like my first play would be get somebody who's going to be able to be the subject matter expert. They're going to be able to talk about exactly all the things that our customers care about at a very deep level, and create demand for the category. So
another question just coming to pop into my mind. So obviously we still need to be bringing in teams to work opportunities and turn that into actual closed business. What do you recommend to people that are working outsourced? I mean, this is an important area of business. An awful lot of business, for various reasons, needs to be done third party. That can include teams of SDRs. That can include outsourced sales enablement. You guys are kind of an outsourced company in a way, at Refine Labs to one degree or another, if I understand correctly. So what are some of the concerns or maybe some best practices, recommendations you could make in that space? I've got a team that's maybe based in this city of SDRs. Maybe I have an enablement guy, or team working here, and I've got my own internal team. Talk about maybe coordinating those things briefly, if you could. What are your recommendations?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. How to coordinate, like,
if you're working with outsourced solutions. What are some ways you can implement a demand gen strategy, especially given that the lead gen model is still so ensconced? My question stinks, so thanks for helping me with that.
How can you state it one more time? I'm having trouble kind of wrapping my head around this.
Okay, so most companies don't share this demand gen methodology or philosophy. So obviously one solution to the question is to hire those who maybe do. But maybe you have a team you're working with and they're good and you want to make a shift, but it's not internal, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think you could do? So let's say I'm the business development guy at the firm, and I'm sitting in that chair, and I'm like, okay, Todd, you've closed me. I want to shift to this philosophy. Can you give us some? I'm catching you completely off guard here, Todd. It's not even fair of me. But I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on how I could go about that? Because so far the conversation has been completely internal, right? We're assuming that we have an internal marketing team with an internal team of sales pros, right? More or less. So maybe speak. I mean,
I think, like with Refine Labs, most agencies are, and maybe this is where the question's coming from. Like most agencies that people think of, it's like, I outsource my creative to this agency. I get consulting from this person over here. And then like, I have to figure out internally how to like bring them together and like do that. At Refine Labs, basically like we're all that. So like we're in your Salesforce instance. We're doing creative. Like we're measuring all of these things that we were just talking about earlier. So it almost comes down to like the partner that you choose needs to know what they're doing is not good of an answer. That is like, I don't know how else to say it. It's like
you may have to get them sold on it maybe and bring them along.
But like, again, this comes back to having like subject matter expertise. Like,
yeah,
the whole point of demand gen is to build this over time so that like, yes, I know you can do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm bought into that, and then proving results. Like,
sure.
I don't have a great answer for you.
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing concern. It's an ongoing project, right? To shift the focus away from some of these older models. Just like cold calling is something that can't really be done the way it could have been done even just maybe 5 or 10 short years ago. You can still kind of do some first calling, as some of our guests on the show have called it. But it's just another way, an important way, that we can better innovate with this demand gen philosophy. And Todd, I thank you so much for bringing that to the conversation today. It's been a ball, and you've really got a lot of juices flowing in the minds of our audience. I know that for sure. So thanks so much for being here. I want to let the guests know that are listening today, or the audience, I should say, that we do have a fantastic topic next week, and that's going to be the 5 unforgivable sins of SaaS sales copywriting. And Todd, you probably want to come back and hear that, because that seems like this is right in your bailiwick as well. But once again, Todd, thanks so much for being on Evolve Sales. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
All right. Everyone have a great weekend. Thanks again for being here. Take care. That's going to do it. Bye-bye, everybody.